Good afternoon and welcome to Unboxed Lunch. Before we get started, please know that this event is being recorded. I'm Jenny Williams, Associate Director of the Archives of American Art. We are thrilled that you are joining us for lunch, which I'm enjoying here in Pawleys Island, South Carolina. I've gotten a jump start on the holiday weekend. Jacob Proctor, the Gilbert and Kinney New York collector at the Archives of American Art, will soon join us from our New York offices. Today's event will feature the newly acquired papers of Four Walls. A few housekeeping items before we get started though. At any time during the webinar, you can submit your questions in the Q&A at the bottom of the control panel on your screen. Closed caption is also available. You can assess captions by clicking the CC button on the right side of the control panel. We're so excited that two of the organizers and co-founders of Four Walls are joining us today, artists Adam Simon and Michael Ballou. So please feel free to join in the conversation where appropriate. Now let me introduce and welcome my colleague, Jacob Proctor. Jacob.
Thanks, Jenny. Hi, everybody. My name is Jacob Proctor, and I'm here in the Archives New York office. And it is my great pleasure to be sharing this collection with you. And hello to Mike and Adam. So just a little bit of background. First of all, Four Walls, for those of you who don't know, I know some of the people on or very much know what it was a collaboratively operated, artist-run, I guess I would say it's a space for exhibitions and events that was founded by Adam Simon and Michelle Araujo in their Hoboken loft in 1984. And it ran in Hoboken until 1988. And with a format at that point was essentially a one-night show once a month, followed by a discussion, either a conversation or a panel discussion with the artists and an audience. And in 1991, Four Walls reopened, woke up from its little nap, and woke up in Greenpoint, Williamsburg, sort of right on the border in Brooklyn, and ran from 1991 until 2000 in a converted garage that was occupied by Mike Ballou. And Mike and Adam had been introduced by a mutual friend, Amy Silman, and so they decided to start Four Walls up again in Brooklyn. So that's the basic armature. Four Walls sort of had an afterlife in that Mike, who had organized a film and slide club, continued the film and slide club activities after the space itself stopped operating. So this is a really complete archive. It's really wonderful that way. I'm going to show some great documents. It really starts out with some notes. There's a notebook with Adam's notes from when he was they were first conceiving of the space. This starts out, artists need a little blank in their lives. Discussion, debate, performance, party. So that basically sums up the Four Walls model. And originally it was this idea of having a social club, which I actually didn't realize until recently, and that it was going to be, initially it was going to be called Showtime, and that it would be a sort of membership organization where member artists would get to show their work to each other and talk about it and discuss it. It's interesting because this is around the same time that another artist founded space whose records I collected a couple of years ago, Art in General, also started, and for very similar reasons of artists sort of feeling like there wasn't really a space in between the kind of commercial gallery world and the kind of institutional art world per se. So they're already identifying problems, transportation, funding, space, all of these usual things. And of course, the first question, who shows? So this idea of like, who is going to actually organize these, who's going to curate the shows, and then who's going to get to be in them? It was a question sort of that was taken up very early on. So there's a lot of good notes in here. And it kind of culminates in the production of this letter, which is essentially a letter from Adam, you can see here, explaining sort of the premise, and that the shows will be seen by audiences consisting of artist members and invited guests rather than the general public. It'll be essentially condensed the whole the exhibition opening and the exhibition sort of into one event. They're financing by charging a whopping $1 at the door. And in here, they're trying to raise an initial $400 to $500 in order to kind of fix up the space and get this part of the loft sort of ready to be an exhibition venue.
$1.
Yeah, eventually it went up to $2 without, pretty soon. And so we've got some really nice, some Polaroids of the construction. Let's see if I can take one or two out of the, it's a little hard to, not so easy to see. They're not in great lighting, but you can see sort of them basically just doing basic construction, building out this space. And the first show was a 2-person show, which was the model of you're invited to attend the opening show of Four Walls, a one-day exhibition of work by Joyce Pensato and Christopher Wool. And there's this introduction to Four Walls, followed by presentations by the artist. There's this wonderful hand-drawn map with apparently it's a $2 cab ride or a 20-minute walk from the path.
Awesome.
So this is here we have, there's some Polaroids. This is Joyce with her work and Christopher with his work. And then this is Adam and Joyce and Michelle and Christopher all together. And I think a very washed out picture of Michelle. And they were very lucky that they had one of the people who was sort of one of the, I guess, primary organizers at that point, or sort of core group, was a pretty decent photographer, I would say. So there was a lot of, so for each of all these early shows, there's generally a selection of Polaroids. There's an invitation card, and then there's a nice selection of black and white silver gelatin prints. And so here you can sort of see they would mount the show, pull out the stools, and then they would have a conversation. So here it looks like Christopher Wool's reading something and Adam and Joyce are looking on. And then here there's like they're having their kind of conversation, and then I guess it opens up to the audience eventually. So
we have a question about Christopher and Joyce. Do you know if their papers are at the archives?
No, neither of them are. Joyce very sadly passed away like a year and a half ago. Okay. And so I'm hoping that her papers will come to us. Christopher Will is very much still alive. And I would love to chat with him if he's watching. But yeah, no, neither of them, we don't have any of their papers, either of their papers at this point, no.
Okay.
So this is, basically exactly 1 year later, or maybe a little bit less than a year later. This is March of 1985. And you can sort of see the 2-person show kind of expanding. This is a group show. I think this was organized somehow in collaboration. Maybe Adam can I think in collaboration with the Whitney Independent Study Program, or with some people in the Whitney Independent Study Program at the time. But so here we have Greg Bordowitz and Jason Simon, who is Adam's brother, Mark Dion, Andrea Fraser, Marcia Ginsberg, Kendall Buster, Paula Crawford. And this is very ISP sounding. A decision to produce critical work can lead to a wide range of practices if artworks are addressing and analyzing both the world in which we live and the very context which establishes them as artworks, then strategies will develop. Presentation and discussion begin at 6:30. They've gone up to $2 at this point.
Adam says that it was Jason's show and he was at ISB.
Okay, that explains it. So again, already we have, the sort of the sharing of curatorial duties and authorship is a really important part of Four Walls, I think, in that even though Adam and Michelle and then Adam and Mike were like running the show, essentially, they weren't curating all the shows themselves. The shows were really curated by the community of artists, kind of for the community of artists. And this is a really, I think, a really important part of Four Walls' legacy, in that they really maintained that throughout. They never sort of institutionalized in a way that a lot of other spaces, for example, Art in General, very much did. So here's Mark Daya, Jason Simon trying to figure out if something's level. Again, they all look like such kids. Installing. And then there's a bunch of nice photographs of the show itself, where you can see the works. This is see, there's Andrea Fraser. I think that's Greg Bordowitz. Here's the panel discussion. And I should also mention that there are, I haven't actually found this one yet, but I'm sure it's in there. There are audio recordings of all or almost all of these conversations and panel discussions, which is a really amazing resource to have. I'll show a couple of those coming up. So of course everybody's smoking because it's the 80s. So this is a really, we can really get a sense both of what the work in the show was and how the show was laid out, as well as kind of who was there and what they were doing. This is like 1 year later, and here's one of these tape recordings. So this is the panel. This was interesting to me because this was a group show called Incredible Systems of Belief in Contemporary Photography, curated by Larry Rinder, who would go on to become a very prominent American critic and museum director and art school dean and writer. And I'm not sure whether he was already at the Whitney at this point or not yet. I'm guessing probably not yet. But he came up, if those of you who are repeat visitors to this webinar program, I showed some really wonderful correspondence from Larry Rinder that was in Michelle Cohn's papers last year. So, again, we have the sort of some snapshots of the installation process, and then some shots of people looking at the show. We have a contact sheet, so most of these are printed in the files, and then of course the discussion, which is really, in a lot of ways, the discussion was the main event, and the idea, I think, in a lot of cases, was to be able to show work in a way that it was really freed from a lot of the pressures that normally would accompany the mode of, the means of showing work that were available to artists at the time, and to really make much more prominent the discourse around the work and how the meaning was being produced at the
Adam's
time.
adding a few comments.
Oh, great. Oh, wow. It was Larry Rinder's first curatorial venture, which is amazing.
Yeah.
And yes, I should have mentioned that Stephen Kasher was the photographer for all of these wonderful black and white shots, who later had a photo gallery. So he really did know what he was doing. So
we had a question as you're transitioning, getting ready for the next folder. We had a question about, do you have an idea of how many exhibits would have been shown at Four Walls over that span of 24 years?
Well, it was 4 years in Hoboken, between 4 and 5 years, and then 9 years in Williamsburg. And they were pretty consistently about once a month. It's not I don't think it was it was entirely regular, but it was that was basically there are a lot of shows. There are, you know, I don't know, at least 70 or 80, maybe more.
Do you have sort of information on each of those?
We have information on every show. Every
That's
single one is documented in some way or other. Usually there's a combination of printed material, photographic material, either slides or prints or both, an audio recording, and then at a certain point, there are a lot of video recordings as well, because Mike got a Hi8 video camera, and that became the preferred mode of documentation for the Four Walls events in Williamsburg. And I can show you, I'm going to show, so for each of the Williamsburg shows, Mike had developed this amazing sort of DIY archival system where each one of the shows has a box, and then inside the box you can see the kind of document, whatever the documentation is. And that, again, that sort of varies from show to show, but it usually has these three primary elements. So I will, this is the first show at the Bayard Street space in Williamsburg. And so there are 2 audio cassette recordings of the panel discussion. There's a sleeve of slides, and then there is a folder so we have some invitation cards. This is great. I don't know if this was also Helen Molesworth's first curatorial undertaking, but it must, if it wasn't her first, it was very, very early. And so this is a show that she organized called The Transmission of Violence, with Roddy Bogawa, Renee Green, Claire Pentecost, David Smith, Peter Tolkien, and Henry Urbach. I should say that Claire Pentecost at this time was also kind of member of, I guess, a kind of organizing committee, because when Four Walls moved to Williamsburg, at first it was kind of organized by a sort of loose kind of, I guess a committee is maybe the right word, of Adam and Mike and Amy Silma and Claire Pentecost. And eventually it sort of became mostly just Adam and Mike, although the others remained involved, but maybe not in quite as a formal a way. And so here we have.
Adam thinks that it may also be Helen's first.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, it's the first show of Helen's that I have ever come across. So here, there's Helen in the middle. There's Adam introducing the panel discussion. And so there's some great shots. There's Renee Green, Claire Pentecost, and David Smith. And I, for one, I'm very excited to hear what's on some of these recordings. I think that these could be like a really rich resource for future researchers. Oh, here's a nice picture of, here's Amy Silman and Paul Ramirez Jonas, I guess, working the door, it looks like. So this is really like a great sort of example of, like, you know, you can really see a kind of, this is a moment, you know, when Williamsburg in particular was really coming into it, you know, becoming a center within the New York art world. And I can actually introduce, this is just a photocopy, but there's this sort of drawing by Ward Shelley, the Four Walls story with the Hoboken years, white columns where there was a group of set of shows that kind of closed out Four Walls in Hoboken, hibernation, and then the Williamsburg years. And, you know, this was really like a moment of real development within the art world in New York, and Four Walls played a big part in that. And so it's really kind of amazing for us to be able to have it for researchers as this period is increasingly being historicized at this point. So you can, again, it's sort of, I don't know if these are still Steve Kasher at this point, or if this is somebody else. But there's usually quite a lot of good photography within these collections. This was a very, seems like quite a serious show. Four Walls, of course, would become known for its more, for not only for a kind of interesting combination of sort of cerebral, very self-reflexive kinds of exhibitions that were kind of at the same time as mounting shows that were kind of a little bit zanier, sometimes just outwardly funny. And I'm going to show, here's one that I kind of love. This is
Mike says that he thinks that Danny Simon took those photos.
There's definitely still some attribution work to be done with this collection, but it's really it's going to be a lot of fun for people to get into. And so I'm going to pull out some things from the Travel and Leisure show.
Okay, so we've gotten a lot, probably the most comments on our invitation. People were concerned that I messed up and included a photo that had nothing to do with the event. So lots of questions about to explain the photo in the that was the cover image for the invitation to this event.
Okay, well, I will see what I can do about that. Let's switch over to so this is the invitation to participate in the show. This is from I can make it a little bit less lumpy. So it says, "You're invited. Comrades, how about letting your hair down for a day? I'm inviting you to be in the backroom show at Four Walls for the Travel and Leisure show on March 1st. The backroom is going to be a wall of real drawings by artists done when they're on vacation. You know, the real drawings, the slightly embarrassing ones you do of treetops or your friends sleeping or flowers in the backyard. It's a show about your unofficial style, not your sophisticated, knowing, smart work, and not even necessarily even the work you're good at." And it goes on and on, says that names will be, it'll be partially anonymous so that you won't be singled out for ridicule, et cetera, et cetera. And so this show was, I guess, people organized at least in part by Amy Silma. And where that photograph came from is from this wonderful stack of prints. And this was, I guess, a sort of performance piece at the opening, where people were in a sandbox on vacation at the beach, where you get yourself buried in sand. And this is identified on the back as Janina and Tony and Beth Haggard. So maybe people didn't remember this as being part of the show. This is there are lots of photographs of this show, as you can see. There's Amy and Fred Tomaselli and Mike in the fishing vest, and Adam, Amy and Fred again. So there are lots of, there's pictures of people installing their work. There's Mike again. There's the audience, who I guess are all wearing sunglasses, I suppose because they're all on vacation, imagining themselves in some sunny clime. This show included a number of things. So there were works by these artists, by Janine and Tony and Beth Haggard. So I guess that was their piece of these other people. And then there were travelogues, which were sort of, I guess, delivered live performances. So Peggy Awesh, Jessica Chalmers and Marianne Weems, Brian Dewan was a very frequent Four Walls collaborator. Perry Hoberman also comes up a lot, Michael Smith as well, Kelly Bosky and Adam Simon. So there are a lot of this, and then in the back room, real drawings done by real artists on real vacations.
I love this.
So I think these shows often had a kind of theatricality to them, and a kind of spirit of fun and play, or being serious about being unserious, I guess, is maybe one way we might think about it. And there's a nice example in here of sort of, as we were working on this acquisition, we were trying to do some identifications, and Mike came up with this great idea of essentially crowdsourcing. So probably some of the people on this on here participated in this, where he would put photos up on Instagram and then ask everybody who was, all the people who saw them to identify as many people as they could. And then he made these kind of great tracing paper overlays so that we would know kind of who the people were who were in the audience at these various events.
Very smart.
This is also, I thought that was very clever. Thank you, Mike. There's, again, as usual, we have a recording. This is Four Walls Vacation. It's also known as the Vacation Show in some literature. So this is a fun one. I don't know if there are questions that are coming in. I can't really monitor both the chat.
Yeah, no, I have been reading them aloud, but I did miss this note from Mike that he says that was for Perry Hoberman's 3D slide presentation.
Okay. Oh, so people were actually wearing 3D glasses, which is, I guess, even better, not just sunglasses.
Okay, that was the connection. Sorry about that, Mike. I missed that.
So I'm going to show another box of a show that I sort of particularly, I think is particularly interesting.
Good. Yeah, I think we have time. We definitely have time for one more box.
Okay, we'll do one more box. This is a great one. This is the Neurotic Art Show. And this is a kind of very four walls kind of an event. So I'm going to switch over here. And this is a camera. Meet me at camera 2. So again, here's the kind of one of these photos, and so this is a case where they invited, they organized it so that there were 4 psychoanalysts, 1 art historian, or 1 psychoanalytic art historian, and 3 psychoanalysts on a panel, and they were. The exhibition was comprised of the first 55 artworks that were submitted. All should be less than 2.5 inches. Maybe that's 2.5 inches. That's very small. In either direction, maybe it's 2.5 feet. Able to be hung on the wall with push pins or small nails. And there's some photographs of the show. So here we have, here's the panel of analysts.
Adam says it is 2.5 feet.
Yeah, I think that was a typo, because I was like, I've seen these shots and they're definitely bigger than that. And so here there's the panel discussion with the analysts and the artworks behind them. Here's so there's a lot of photos here. And it's just like such an amazing idea to like have a show of neurotic, quote unquote, neurotic art. And there are lots of recordings. There are sort of multiple audio tapes of this and lots of slides. And then they produced this great book of the event, which was, I don't know if this was the first Four Walls publication, but it's very funny. And so the panel discussion is transcribed. And it's a very it's a really funny read. So I think this will be this is a show that I know other people were quite jealous of them for having come up with.
Jacob, one last question, because we're getting close to the half-hour point. And you should probably anticipate this, because we do get this question, is when will the collection be processed and digitized?
Well, it'll probably be processed within, I would say, our timeline is kind of still a little bit COVID hangover from COVID, but usually it's within 12 to 18 months. There's a finding aid, and the finding aid will go up online. It's nice. This will probably go relatively quickly because it's pretty well organized already. Actually, it's very well organized. And once the finding aid goes up, people can, it'll go to DC, people can make appointments to see it in the reading room, or they can request that particular folders be digitized using our digitization on demand service. And then, things, maybe other things will get digitized more quickly than that, but that's always an option. And because each show will essentially have its own folder, it'll be a very easy one to do that way.
Okay. Well, thank you, Jacob, for sharing with us, and Adam and Mike. Not only thank you for donating this amazing collection, but for joining us today. Just to tell our guests that we are hoping that maybe later this year we could potentially do something in person and talk about this amazing collection, because Jacob just touched the surface of all that is here. But from all of us at the Archives of American Art, thank you for joining us. Please tune in next month on June 24th, where we'll be featuring the papers of Marie Romero Cash. Thanks a lot, guys.
Thanks, everyone.